Well, I don't know why I'm showing up so funny on here.
I
The
don't know if you
lighting
got
is kind of
a
funky,
bright
isn't
light
it?
behind you or something, maybe. I don't know.
I'm sitting
Wow.
downstairs instead of in my office, but I thought fresh light might be good, but I'll move over
Lighting is
here.
tricky.
Sorry about that. Are you guys ready to get started, or should we
We
wait just
are
a couple
ready.
minutes? You're ready.
All right, we're good to go on both recordings.
All right. Well, welcome to the PBIS classroom implementation using the framework to promote culturally responsive engagement strategies. During this session, you will learn the 6 PBIS classroom management practices that are used during PBIS state cohort training and how they can be enhanced with culturally and linguistically responsive teaching, CLRT. Both of the presenters are PBIS trainers in Southern Minnesota. John Beach was trained on PBIS in Minnesota's first state cohort. He has been in education for 30 years, of which 20 of those years as an elementary principal in Princeton, Minnesota. He has presented and shared at state and national PBIS conferences over the years, often resulting in the creation of award-winning PBIS videos. Hopefully he shares some of those sometime. I think later today or tomorrow he may. Angie Ellsworth has been in education for over 20 years, working with school-age students with academic, behavioral, and mental health challenges and supporting parents and school staff and helping them to succeed. Currently, she is a school social worker with previous vast experiences as a behavior consultant in Rochester Public Schools. She is also a behavior consultant, coach, and trainer with Southeastern Services Cooperative. She brings an interactive and an energetic approach to professional development and always implementing and talking about those real life applications. So that's always exciting. We want to welcome everyone to this fantastic session to learn more about PBIS classroom implementation. And please join me in welcoming our wonderful presenters, John Beach and Angela Ellsworth.
All right, well, thank you very much. Angie, you want to just take it away? That was a great introduction, Liz. I appreciate that. I think we just jump into it for the sake of time.
Yeah, thank you. No problem. All right. So yes, our objectives today, we're going to review those 6 PBIS classroom components. The link can get you to those slides, and all of these slides have some additional links to allow you to dig a little deeper. But our primary focus is going to be on identifying some of those culturally responsive equity practices within each of those components. So some of them are a little bit deeper than others, but we've got a lot of resources to support you as you move forward with this topic and providing these resources to your students. Some of those resources that we are talking about today are going to be those 6 classroom practices, and this links to more in-depth explanation and understanding of all of those. So if you're brand new to PBIS, those are a great place to start. As you start continuing your work and focusing maybe some of your efforts on some more cultural responsiveness, you may also find that this link to the PBIS field guide is also a valuable tool with both examples and resources to continue your work meeting in these 5 key identity and environmental areas. So a lot of the things that we're sharing today are accumulation of all of these things. In addition to this 3rd resource, which is not a PBIS resource, but as you work towards more of the culturally responsive implementation and engagement strategies, you may find that this resource is really valuable, and I'll be showing you some specific things that are coming right out of this book to really increase engagement and reduce misbehavior, which fits right in with PBIS and the framework that we're going to be talking about. So before you begin, one of the primary things to consider anytime that we talk about cultural responsiveness, or we talk about creating a culture or recognizing the cultural backgrounds from our students and any kind of diversity in our classrooms, we do want to make sure that we mention that a key factor in implementing equitable practices in your classroom is really to be intentional and reflect on our own personal values, attitudes, and beliefs about our students, about the families from which they come from, all of the things that they bring to our classroom. the things that make them unique and special, but also then the things that maybe are more of a challenge, or maybe more of a something that doesn't, something we're not experienced with or we don't understand, but always to just reflect on our attitudes, values, and beliefs, and how can we continue to learn about our students as we learn about ourselves in implementing and managing behaviors in our classrooms. A couple ways to do that. And again, some of these are taken from that cultural responsive field guide. When we think about the ability of our staff to reflect on who we are as teachers, research shows that becoming more aware of our own personal, racial, ethnic, and cultural identities, as well as the impact that our identities have on our practice, can really help us develop and apply expectations and practices. So the more that we turn inside, turn inward, look at how we respond to behavior, we respond to our students, and how those things, our own personal experiences, have impacted our responses, can really help bring an awareness and help us view from a different lens ways to respond and look at our students and their behaviors perhaps in a different way. Some ways to do that, some staff ways that have really impacted some staff throughout the region that I've worked with. There are a few different ways to start this kind of reflection. One of those is the Harvard Implicit Bias Test. If you Google some of these or take a look. Another one is the iceberg concept of cultural reflection, using that tool as an activity. There are a lot of TED Talks, book studies, and speakers that can aid in staff development, aid in that process. Lots of independent type things too to offer staff the opportunity to reflect. The quote in the yellow box is, those are kind of intermittent throughout this workshop, just to be able to give you some feedback from staff who have used these practices and who have found them to be pretty valuable in their own growth in implementing and becoming more culturally aware. So one staff person said, after experiencing some of these strategies, that seeing my own lens, my biases, is a crucial part of being able to develop other lenses. So again, another opportunity to do that would be to use something very similar to this, to allow staff to really take some time to reflect on the different types of attitudes or values or beliefs that perhaps influence the way that they feel around all sorts of elements of culture. So for example, you would take a look at this matrix. You'll notice the elements of culture on the left regarding space and proximity. What do I really believe or feel about that? And we know that in classrooms, that's a pretty big thing, right? Personal space, maybe making sure that you are giving people and being aware of personal space, attitude towards time, finishing projects, transitions, even gender roles or family roles. So taking some of those cultural elements and then really trying to reflect and take some intentional time to say, hey, this is how I was raised for that. This is what it meant for my family. What are my norms that come out of that? And then what are some of those other things? Like, how does that compare to my school's norms about that? And how does that compare to my families and my students? And we all know that there are lots of different cultural values and beliefs from the variety of students that we have in our classrooms, and then how that difference could create conflict. So again, a staff comment after taking part in this activity said that they are more cognizant of their biases, where they're at in their journey, what they need to improve. And not that anything that they have done has been wrong or bad, but they're looking for opportunities to grow. So as we are thinking about CLRT, as we're working to move and make progress in this journey, recognizing that a lot of the things that we do are super effective and super great for students and done with the best of intentions. Are there some ways that we can enhance that? And those are some things that we hope to share with you today. Okay, John.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. So I see my role today as being the sidekick. So what I'll be looking at is or sharing with you are just the foundational pieces. So I think of it like this: like you're building a house, you see the walls going up, you see the foundation being put in, working in water, electricity. It's just kind of a bare. You see the bare walls, and what Angie's doing is taking these concepts, these really foundational pieces. Without the foundation, it's not going to hold up. But it's only the beginning. What really is the important pieces are those things that Angie will be sharing, and how do you make those come to life? How do you make them? Thinking of the home again. How do you make it a livable space? So one thing I would like to do, Angie, if you would mind just clicking on that link, I just want to show the format of what this looks like. If you want to just click on the first practice down there, there we go. Each of these practices has a really pretty cool PDF that goes along with it. And if you scroll down to the bottom there, Angie, on this the second page, it has a rubric. So as I'm talking about these things, these are really good to take as a guide to see, well, do we have this thing in place, or do I as a classroom teacher or as a PBIS team, does our school does classrooms have these things in place? So each one of them has the parts that make up that particular practice. So I can go back. I just want them to see what it looks like so that they can see there is behind each one of these things does have some really good details for you to look at for your implementing. And then as we go into the presentation here, Angie's really going to take those things, those ideas, and how do you really layer into the positive pieces that make it come to life. So let's jump ahead. So the first one's physical environment. This one's pretty straightforward. Really, what does the layout of the room look like? How will you have a space that is just functional for your students? Thinking about, how do you make sure students are on task? How is it a safe space? How are you respecting student space in general? Just how are they going to be able to see you? What's your movement patterns? And how does that look within that space? So really very straightforward. Just what is the physical environment of the classroom? You're muted there, Angie.
Ways that you can enhance that physical environment as you continue to just think about the physical environment. Can your students see themselves reflected around the classroom? Research says, CLRT research says that if you can intentionally work up to about 70% of the posted visual items in your room that include a variety that represent your student cultures, that's really the goal. Now, 70% is huge to start with. So to not overwhelm yourself, think about some easy ways that you could start that, right? Bringing in some culturally responsive books, some content that reflects your students. Are they reading stories or hearing about watching videos, listening to movies, or being aware of movies that are reflective of their culture? A couple examples here are even around this calendar. For one of these schools, they use some of the native language and put those up in addition to English language in the classroom. Different ways that you can challenge or encourage your students to celebrate some of their uniquenesses and bring them to life in their classroom. One of the schools I worked with really took on the Black History Month daily inspiration, and they shared a lot of different things about who some of those special people are, who maybe are their heroes or people that they've been influenced by, and then they use that as an opportunity to speak more about their own culture as well. So just different ways to bring that into your physical environment.
Thanks, Angie. So if you're thinking of these 6 practices and you really don't have any in place at this point, to survive, you probably do in some way, shape, or form, but more formally, I would suggest that you look through them and figure which ones make the most sense to start with. This is a real simple one. Like I said, to be successful with physical arrangements and within your school, just keep these things in mind. Just being able to have some options for student choice. Have some options for, how do we do small group activities versus large group? Just thinking about the logistics of your space. And that's not just classroom spaces, but all spaces within the school can be applied to. So, even from really practical suggestions of having your floor marked, so for different type of activities as desks seem to kind of move around the classroom. Beep.
Go ahead, number 2.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I'll try not to be super annoying. It's just kind of a gift I have. So this next one is really just creating that classroom matrix. As a school, you have your overall school-wide PBIS matrix. This is really about the routines within your classroom. So you have your overall school rules and expectations. These are then taking them within the classroom and developing procedures with them. So you have your overall expectations, rules for the classroom, and then what does it look like? And then just being able to teach those at the very beginning of the school year and then ongoing throughout the year. I like what Dr. LaSalle said earlier about pre-correcting. So this allows you to take a look at those matrix items, and if something's not going well, instead of waiting for something to happen that is not positive, if you're noticing it, teach those expectations, reteach them, let them know. But just being really clear on what those expectations are really can help you as a educator. Beep.
When you're thinking about those expectations, think also about some of those hidden rules at school. Sometimes there are lots of things that we think are just, kind of unexplained rules that we just believe that everybody should know. And how do we address these with all of our students? Well, our formal PBIS training tells us we need to teach them, then model them, practice them, and then certainly praise. So for example, there are some of those hidden rules, like at most schools, when people ask how you're doing, you give a quick response and don't tell them about your entire day, right? Hey, how you doing? Great, great. It's not, oh my gosh, do you want to hear my whole day? Oh my gosh, first it started like this. And then, oh my God, that's really kind of one of those hidden rules as adults that we kind of just understand. Now for students, asking permission if you need to use the restroom or get a drink, raising your hand if you want to share an answer. When you turn a paper in, use formal words instead of some of your text message lingo. A quick story about a student who transferred into one of my buildings, and within a day or two, the teacher came to me and said, oh my gosh, Angie, this kid is walking around the room. They're always talking. Whenever I have something to say, they're listening to my teaching. But then when I have a question, they just blurt it out and they just, oh, I know the answer. And the answers are right, but they're not in their seat and they're not raising their hand. What do I do? And it's just driving me crazy. And so when I got to sit down to chat with the student, I said, hey, how's it going? Your teacher really loves your energy in class, and just wondering, how you feel about sitting in your desk or raising your hand. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, in my other school, my teacher used to let me walk around the back of the room all the time. And I didn't have to raise my hand. Everybody just shouted out answers. And so for me to think about, okay, how at my school, and even though it's a school, our school still had a different set of hidden rules that at his previous school didn't fit. So now at our school, I would say something like, okay, great. At our school, most students sit in their desk and raise their hands when they want to share. Can I help you practice that? Can we try to get that, so it might be something you can try? Absolutely. So thinking about some of those hidden rules, we often will presume that students know them when it is possible that they might not, depending on the environment from which they came. So some of those things to consider: tone of voice, personal space, eye contact, even bathroom norms, hallway norms, classroom norms, lunchroom norms, right? Sometimes it looks a little bit different. One great tool, I've had lots of teachers utilize this in the beginning of the year, kind of as a get to know you activity. But really what it does is it helps give the teacher a really introspective look at what things look like in a student's home. Now, for different developmental levels, obviously our youngest learners would have a really hard time filling this out. It could be an activity that could be sent home if you wanted to do something like that, or you could modify it a little bit. For older kids, they could probably fill it out quite quickly. But really, then also what it does is it gives the teacher a great insight into what does our class believe that our classroom should look like. So if our 3 expectations are be safe, be respectful, and be responsible, and I get all of these matrices back from my students, and in class, my students say, oh, be safe means that we should, keep hands and feet to self and tell the adults if they're a problem. Now, if a lot of my feedback is something totally different, then I can put all of those, all that feedback from my students together and be like, hey, guess what? Here's what you said you want our classroom to look like. This is how our classroom is going to be safe. Can we all agree on that? Yes. And then we move on to the next one. The at home and neighborhood pieces of this really give us some insight into what home expectations look like. Certainly, we've probably worked with students who home behavior and school behavior is quite different. Also, neighborhood behavior, right? Like sticking up for your friends and don't backing down and looking the other way. If that's the behavior that has come to be expected to be safe in the neighborhood, we know that to transfer some of that behavior into the classroom and into school, we're going to have kids who say, I'm not going to back down. I'm going to stick up for myself. If he goes after my friend, I'm going after him, because that's a behavior that is accepted in that other environment. So using this matrix, you can kind of see how this helps generate understanding of students' behavior, helps bridge that gap between expectations at home, expectations at school, and really could be a great opportunity to have conversations with parents in the event that you continually have some challenges in the classroom with behavior, helping to understand what that looks like at home and validating it. And we'll talk about validating here coming up in a little bit.
All right. The third one is all about active supervision. And so this is really about just being aware of the environment. And so just as an educator, we sometimes joke about what this doesn't look like. There's during the little film festival tomorrow, I'll share an example of what it isn't before sharing what it is. But just really being able to be aware of the environment, just simply being aware, that does help students be engaged by them knowing that you're aware of the environment and being part of the classroom, not doing other things or trying to do grades or correcting papers or whatever it might be. Being aware can also give you the opportunity to be connected with your students, to encourage them. It allows you to be aware of what things may need to be corrected or pre-corrected, and it just helps build a relationship. So I know being a teacher is a super difficult job, and there's so many things to do, but really just being able to be aware of your environment and what that looks like. Again, just a reminder that all these 6 are in that link at the very beginning. There's some really good tools and other links within that. And if you do look at the one that's posted on the state website, I'll throw that link in here too. It is much more detailed as well to each of those as well. Beep.
Thank you.
You're back. But this is me, I think, right? So just some examples, non-examples. So the non-examples are really kind of glaring, not paying attention to the space, sitting, doing crossword puzzles. Also, some things that we don't thought I was thinking about, but they're just walking in the same pattern. If students are aware that you're never going to come to my corner of the classroom or you're never over in this spot, it does a couple things. It doesn't help build that relationship with that student, but at the same time, it allows them to maybe be off task, not being engaged. Another thing here, just not spending too much time with one student or a group of students, and then just being able to interact with everybody, not just specific kids. So just being able to be aware of being aware of your movement and how you're supervising that area.
Yeah, and you know what? I love this one, John. And sometimes I know it's really hard, but we often, if we've already identified some of those hot spots in our room that we know, might be causing a little bit more misbehavior than normal. Naturally, it's a part of who we are to gravitate towards those kids, to be able to kind of, provide that supervision and to really to be monitoring it more closely, I'll challenge you to try to not be so close to those students, but to use proximity to recognize that just to catch their eye enough that they see you watching, even if it's from halfway or all the way across the room, that they see that you are still scanning and supervising without being so close in proximity to them. I'll challenge you to do that and see if they kind of pick up. And then as you see that if their behavior starts to escalate or to increase, then you just take a step or two closer to them, not necessarily right next to them as needed, but just see how much in proximity you need to be in order for them to change their behavior. And then as far as you need to go until they change, then back away again. And what that does is helps build some independence, but also helps build some self-monitoring of the student and starts them to start self-correcting, like, oh, she's coming, I better stop. And eventually the hope is that you can just catch their eye from all the way across the room and you won't even have to move over there, but they know that you're watching and they can self-correct some of their behavior. So another strategy to try when you are using that active supervision.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. The fourth one is encouraging appropriate behaviors. This is the mirror to school-wide. We want to be able to find students making those positive choices. We want to use behavior-specific praise. This can help create that positive climate. It helps build the relationships. The foundation, if you were about boil down PBIS for me, it's really about the relationships that are being able to be made between students and between students and adults within the school. So this is a huge part of it, just acknowledging and recognizing the good things that are happening within the classroom. So the link or the snapshot for this one goes into details about different ideas about what that might look like within your classroom. But in general, the acknowledging, giving that specific praise will enable that behavior to continue in the future. Letting students know that you appreciate them. Some folks get hung up on the word reward or recognizing, but we all want to be acknowledged for the work that we do. Even as adults, of course, that we want to be told that we're doing a great job, and what that looks like and being as specific as possible. The idea here is that the more that we can encourage, the more time we'll have instruction, the less behavior that we'll see. It has to be a balance between the encouraging and then the working with the behavior that we're trying to, the inappropriate behavior.
Awesome. One of the ways that you can acknowledge some of that behavior, I know when we talk about cultural responsiveness, we think about, and if you go back to that matrix on what are some of those expected behaviors at home, and maybe they don't quite fit into the school culture that we're trying to create for students. So one of my most effective tools that I love to coach teachers with is taken from Dr. Shraki Holly and some of his culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning work. And it's this theory of vabbing, which vab means we validate, affirm, build, and bridge. And when we acknowledge what kind of behavior that student is showing, we help acknowledge that it's positive in the right context, okay? And then we connect that to our school culture and try to help them code switch and incorporate into teaching what that school culture looks like. So for example, in the validate and affirm, when a student does something that traditionally hasn't been accepted in a school setting, what can I do to positively acknowledge the behavior? Okay, so here's an example. My student who was walking around in the back. So what could I, when he's blurting out, when he's walking around, I could say something like, oh my gosh, I love your energy. I love that you are here willing to share. You are following along, you're paying attention. So I'm going to validate and affirm that I love the energy. He's answering the questions correctly. You got it. Now to build that, I have to think, okay, how am I going to connect this behavior to some appropriate context at school, and how can I help him learn about school culture? Hey, when you see your friends outside, that would be a great way to get their attention to play outside on the playground. You could walk over, you could run over, you could, say, hey, come and play football. Well, and when you're in class, would you be able to try sitting down at your desk and raising your hand? If you need to pace back and forth, no problem. Let me talk to the teacher. We'll work that out. But I'm here to help you try to figure out how you can do both of these things in a really positive way to keep learning. What do you think about that? So the goal of vabbing is to preserve the relationship. Now, imagine if I handled that student a different way. Can you please sit down? Raise your hand. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you raise your hand? Nope, raise your hand. I've asked you before to please sit down. Thank you. What kind of energy does that take from me? What kind of culture am I now establishing, not intentionally, in my classroom? And how is that building my relationship with my student? So vabbing is one of my most favorite strategies. It takes a little bit of practice. I've linked some examples here. I'll show you just a few. When you vab, a quick reminder, not to use the word but. Okay, so if I said, "Oh, I really love how you have energy in my class, and you're really engaging in the discussion by shouting out answers, but I need you to raise your hand." Using but does not validate. So just a tip, that took me a lot of practice to not use the word but. So here are some examples. I like the middle one that I've highlighted. When somebody says, "That's not fair, I don't want to do that," I can totally validate. I can totally say, "You're right. It doesn't seem fair. And I'm here," notice, "and I'm here to help you work through all the rules of school, even when they don't seem fair." Okay, now granted, I'm in elementary school, so most of my examples are elementary based, but you might be able to think about how you can developmentally wordsmith these phrases to help validate, affirm, build, and bridge. I also like the bottom one. It looks like this might be a challenge for you. Maybe you've got a kid with their head down. Maybe you've got a kid who is refusing. May I sit with you and help you get through the tougher ones? You can use vabbing with any kind of behavior. It just takes a little practice. I like the second one too. Some days are just harder, aren't they? Some days are just hard. Oh my gosh, you're right. And I'm here to help you stay on track and do your best. Can we get back to work and follow classroom expectations, or do you need a couple minutes? How can I help you get through this? So again, vabbing is a really great, successful strategy that recognizes any kind of behavior. Maybe it's cultural, maybe it's not, but if it's not fitting into our school cultural behavior, school culture, then how can we vab to get that student back on track?
And just share some examples of that behavior specific praise. Just kind of a routine. I think it is helpful for a school to have a routine for both, like Angie's saying, how do you respond to that inappropriate behavior, but at the same time, how do you acknowledge the positive things? So letting the student know, some examples of this are simply, Diane, awesome, you're demonstrating listening to the speaker, that's being respectful. So it connects to your matrix, it connects to what they were doing specifically, lets the student know what they did, instead of just simply good job or some not very specific praise. So who's the student or group, let them know what is the term of praise you're going to use, connect it to the matrix that you have within your classroom, and then how's it connected to the school-wide expectation? And then, it can be a tangible, like a tiger paw or something, or it can simply be verbal. But just letting them know the work that they're doing is appreciated.
I love that. And lots of times depending on your school system and what stage of implementation you are, you may have some of those tangible things like a ticket or a point or a school store or some kind of a drawing. Definitely age appropriateness. You've got to find out what kind of carrots your students are interested in. I know I have a lot of teachers who tell me, oh my gosh, they're only doing it for a ticket, or they're only doing it for this, or better yet, you get kids who say, well, I was good, now do I get a ticket? And that's really a tough mindset to be able to shift away from. But the idea behind this is that you are really trying to build some of that knowledge and understanding and the actual behavior. You're trying to build that positive behavior. So eventually in your implementation, there is an opportunity to wean away from some of those, where kids then just come to understand that my good behavior is expected and I don't need to be rewarded for it. It's just because it's the right part of what we do here at my school. And I know that takes some time. It is kind of a hard thing to do. Some kids, some of the students that we work with when it comes to culture, they are very extrinsically based. Their home culture is a lot about what I get. So think about that when it's reasonable to be frustrated that a student acts out in your classroom and then might go to the office or might go to behavior support or might have some resource time and then comes back with, saying, oh, I had a snack or I got to play. Well, thinking about the ways that the behavior is processed when that happens, and then as long as that specific praise for positive behavior is happening when the behavior is being shown. So anytime it's the littlest thing that you see as positive, to really reinforce that with some of that specific praise.
Yeah. And so the flip side of that is how to respond then when we do have some of those behaviors that we don't want to see. And Andrew has mentioned this a little bit earlier too, but just having that, you want to maintain that relationship with the student. So finding ways to let the student know that it's not about the student, but the idea is how do we reduce some of the frequency and intensity of the behavior. PBIS does not eliminate behavior, but it provides us that framework and those tiers to be able to provide the student level support that they need. So there's not a specific strategy, not just one strategy, and one strategy that might work today might not work tomorrow. But what's really important, I think, is to figure out why the behavior is happening. If we can pinpoint what is causing the behavior, what's leading the behavior, that the whole ABCs of the behavior, we can really have a much more successful chance of being successful, I guess, have a better chance of being successful. To go to the next slide there, Angie. And this is just an example of being able to have that dialogue. And this kind of complements the dialogue that was shared earlier. But just trying not to be in the student's face, being professional, being private if at all possible, letting them know what the inappropriate behavior is, just simply stating it, letting them know what the expectation is. How's again connecting it back to the matrix that you have, and then encouraging. A lot of times we may have this conversation, and the encouragement is, I'm going to give you space and time. You're going to let them know what the expectation is. You're going to back away, not hover over the students, but being able to have that conversation. So there's an example on the left, which is basically being private. I'll just read it, easy enough. Teacher saying, Joe, you must really enjoy having the student sit by in class. The expectation during independent time is to focus on your own work, which is doing your best. You can hear that coming from the matrix. I wonder if you could save talking for recess and start your work again. I'll stop back and catch you doing your best. So set the students up what the expectations are. Something really quick and simple, private, not in front of the whole class. And again, if you can figure out what is behind the behavior, it gives you a better chance of figuring out what to do and how to support that particular student.
I'm going to interrupt. I think we maybe accidentally skipped the slides, but there is, maybe we can pull that up at the end, John, if we have a chance. The continuum that you have, I think, is a really great tool.
Sure.
Maybe we can pull those out. I
Sure.
think we will have time at the end.
Yeah, definitely. The last one is really all about good teaching. So giving students opportunities to be engaged and to respond. You go into classrooms, you've probably experienced this, where there just aren't any behavior issues. And it's the same group of kids that may be in another class where you're seeing all kinds of classroom management concerns. It's really about the environment that the staff person is set up, that students are engaged. They're enjoying what they're doing. They're enjoying the relationships they have. The climate and the culture in the classroom is super positive. And it's not about the makeup of the class. It's about what is happening, what the teaching is going on. So just giving students a chance to respond in a variety of different ways. And that just helps keep those students on task. Obviously, the more we have students in class and engaged, the more learning is going to happen. So just finding ways to put those all together, all those pieces together, to give those students an opportunity to respond and be engaged.
And this gets to my most super duper favorite part of all of this, you guys. I'm so excited to share these tools with you. When I first was taught these and trained in these, oh my gosh, total game changer. Okay. So in fact, I even have all of mine printed off on this little ring, because whenever I do lesson planning, this is my go-to. So what are some of those engagement strategies, right? I just mentioned all of the research, all of the rationale between why we should have highly engaged instruction. Yes, But how? What do we do? You've probably experienced sometimes in your class where you've got a really great topic and a really great activity or opportunity for kids to really dig in and learn and take ownership of of the process of learning the content. And then after that, we don't have any other ideas. So I am super thrilled to be able to share these resources from you, taken from that book from Dr. Shraki Holly that I mentioned in the beginning and linked to. And with Dr. Holly's permission and his encouragement to continue this work and talking about culturally responsive teaching, he is more than happy to share. Anybody can buy that book on Amazon, and anybody can look at these activities and start to implement them. As teachers, you are well versed in learning new things and how to implement them to your class. So what I'd like to just show you here is how to really kind of look at this. Okay, so some of these resources, there are attention getting signals. Now, you might already know some of the standard ones, right? Like, and then these are just slides. So you'll notice that they kind of give you what they are. And that's exactly what I printed and just have on a ring. But there are different things like, call and response. Use it to focus the class. It always tells you what the intention of the protocol is. So if I need to focus the class, I might say, all set, and the students would reply, you bet. Now, most kids would need to be taught these if they've never heard them before. So you would just do exactly that. Hey class, when I say all set, you reply, you bet. I might do it 2 times. I might do it 3 times until your voices are calm, your eyes are up on me, and your pencils are down. You would teach the students how to do that, okay? So those are some response or call to attention signals. There are also some examples of read aloud activities. Okay, like, okay, we're doing read aloud. What are different ways I can get kids involved in read aloud? I love this choral, the jump in reading. So if you have some text highlighted on your smartboard or on your screen, you just highlight a couple phrases or words throughout the text. And as you read them out loud, the kids jump in and read those highlighted words with you. Again, just meant to increase engagement, meant to increase attention, a variety. You'll notice also here that some of them are level 1, totally applicable for our youngest learners. And then some of these level 3 ones might require a little bit more planning, maybe a little prep, but they might be for some of our bigger learners or older learners. There's also literacy activities, discussion and response protocols. These are my favorite. I use these the most. Just ways, and look at all of the examples, all the ideas, ways to get kids up and moving and interactive in engaged protocols for the content that you're working on. Absolutely love these. I'm getting really excited to share with you guys. Also now, COVID friendly. So there's some movement protocols. All right, I'm going to go back to our main slide here. So the full website, which is where I just was and showed you, the cards folders. So if you want to print these off on cardstock and make yourself a handy little binder, that's a link to that as well. Now the COVID descriptions, if you are interested, I'm just going to show you real quick. Here's just a PDF. There is an editable one too if you want to do that. But all of the protocols then, instead of being on slides, are written out here. And the red ones, you'll notice on the right column here, COVID adjustments. If your school is still at a place where you are have some protocols in place, or in the event that we go back to school in the fall and there are some safety protocols in place, be mindful of those as well. And then some of them are highlighted in red that they have been adjusted. So I just wanted to give you those as well. But really, let's just take a look at what a couple of these look like. So some very basic discussion protocols, partner share, right? You've probably heard this, turn to your elbow buddy and share. That's an example. And then when we talk about culturally responsive, we use these engagement and discussion protocols and teaching protocols to really allow us a very unbiased way to engage all students. Many of these protocols are meant to give students ownership, but also to recognize that some of our learners are more vocal, less vocal. Some of them are more hands-on, less hands-on. Really, these are intended to engage all students at their level of comfort in and sharing in our classrooms, okay? So there's a couple that I just shared on here to give you some examples of how you could go from basic to advanced, and there's that level 2 in there too. And one really great way to improve understanding and comprehension for all learners. So this protocol is called silent appointment, right? It's a movement protocol. I'm using something called exit directions or visual directions, which you'll notice, and this is a nonverbal classroom management strategy. You'll notice that I intentionally put first to teach my kids the protocol. So the first thing to do for this protocol is to look around the room and make eye contact with someone. I include a visual. So even my slower processors, my lower readers, at a glance, even adults can take a quick glance at that and be like, I need to make eye contact with someone. So it increases our processing time, and it helps support some of our lower students. Also culturally responsive, because that's a visual that people can understand. First, I need to teach, when I teach my kids this protocol, I'll say, first, here's what we do. Next, if I want an appointment, now in some classrooms, teachers do not give a choice. So you can't make eye contact with somebody, and if you don't like them, you can't turn your eyes away quick. So a teacher might implement the rule that you nod at the first person whose eyes you contact. When you are then taken for an appointment, you just cross your arms and it shows that you're taken. Then you meet with the person to discuss, and the teacher then can put up what those discussion questions are, or maybe they've already talked about what the outcome of the assignment might be. So for some of those culturally responsive engagement strategies, to use this exit direction or this visual direction opportunity to tell students first, next, then, including the visuals to help the processing. When I started coaching some teachers using these strategies, as you may know, oftentimes kids are pulled in and out of the classrooms. This has also been a really great transition tool. If you have EAs or paraprofessionals who are bringing students back into the classroom, or maybe somebody has come back from the bathroom and missed some instruction and not sure what to do, this builds independence for all of our learners, for teachers to help transition kids back into work so they can get into momentum. It allows the classroom teacher to continue doing what they're doing. And you can make these for older students. I have seen lots of visuals and lots of directions, like instead of doing first, next, then, they might have a series of 5 numbers. Number 1, this, number 2, this, put them here, then do this, number 3, number 4. So depending again on developmental appropriateness, you can judge how much information you give students and in what capacity. Okay. So those protocols are some of my absolute favorite. And I know that we want to get back to, in summary, we're kind of just really giving you a really brief, fast overview of those 6 foundations of classroom management. But I do want to give, John, were you able to pull up your?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can definitely do that. And then with any of this, feel free to contact us, and offline here, and we can definitely go through any of the materials that we've shared in more depth. But I'll just share my screen then. How's that sound?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. I just put a few on this slide. I think the thing we're talking about is this one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is just the kind of that continuum of strategies responding to the inappropriate behavior, and it gives this list, but then it goes through what do those different ones mean. So from planned ignoring, proximity, to making eye contact, to all these different areas here. These are the more specific error correction strategies, and these slides are a part of the document that's posted as a presentation on the website that was shared for the State Institute's page. So feel free to look at that there. And then there's that. I'm going to stop sharing the screen there just really quickly. I know we only have about 10 minutes of question time, but any questions or comments you can either throw in the chat or just shout out. Thoughts, comments, questions, anything you wanted to hear about in a little more detail?
Yeah, we would. Yeah, certainly. If you have any questions on any of the resources, or if there were if anything did come through the chat that we can address now, we certainly will be happy to take the time to do that.
If you're talking, you're muted.
I'm just going to put a little shout out there. Liz put the link for the evaluations in the chat. So if you can make sure to fill those out for each session, we'd really appreciate it. Just a little plug.
Well, since there's some dead air here, I'm just going to go back and share. This is what I think is a pretty powerful part of this. If you're looking at these strategies, the one thing we didn't really share much about is the whole matrix in the classroom. So we have this is kind of a complement to the school-wide matrix and also the home matrix. But you have this is the win-haul way. So you have your responsible, respectful, being safe. And then you have your overall classroom rules there, what they are within that classroom. So being on task, raising hand, walking quietly, those things. And then it takes that. And then what does it look like? So this is really the meat and potatoes of what does it look like within that classroom for different parts of your day. And you can just determine what are those important things that want to be taught specifically to students. What I like about this one too is it has what are the adults' job or the adults' role within that. I thought that was just a good example of taking that matrix and applying it to that particular school. So just wanted to share that piece since we had some extra time.
Good deal. Now you probably all feel totally overwhelmed or totally energized and ready to roll. But hopefully you found some of these pieces. And again, really understanding and recognizing the year that you have all been through and all of the different things that you have tried and adjusted to and the challenges you've overcome. These things are not intended to overwhelm you and make you think, oh my gosh, there's so much I'm not doing. Really just to give you a great start of resources to keep in your back pocket. So when you are ready as a classroom, as a team, as a building, that there are some things that you know that are out there that can continue to help guide your work. So there are a lot of good things. And John with his 30 years, and I've got some years under my belt. So we've accumulated a lot of stuff over the years, but definitely want to get out some of those best practices to you so you can find something that fits for you and your classrooms and your schools.
All right. I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions, or any. So we want to wrap things up, Aaron. What do you think?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. We had you going.
25 after.
Oh yeah, you've got a couple minutes, but so thank you very much. Lots of wonderful information. I'm seeing a lot of great comments in the chat for thank you for presentation and resources. If we want to wrap up too, if you want to stay on for any questions, there's just a few minutes left, like I said, but otherwise, if you want to stay in this Zoom link, the next session will be the district teams aligning pre-K programs and initiatives. And then the other link will have the classroom management toolkit, proactive praise and relationships. So that's what we have up next. Thank you,
Aaron,
guys.
Yeah, I did see one question. Was it difficult for students to verbalize or write out the different expectations in each category? Oh, I'm wondering if that was about the home matrix. I'm guessing that's probably, oh, yep, I see a thumbs up. Okay. So I had some teachers in later elementary school use this, specifically in 3rd grade, which is where I was helping facilitate this this activity in the classroom. We did not have students send it home. And actually we ended up doing this activity not as kind of a back to school event. We actually did it as more of a restorative activity after there had been some escalating behaviors in the classroom and on the playground. So, and it was not just 1 or 2 students. It was basically like, it was unreal, the whole class. I would say 80% of the class was getting involved in a lot of the drama on the playground, and it would carry over into the classroom, and you know how that can go sometimes. So we used it as kind of a restorative activity to help to help review what those classroom expectations were. And then also as students shared what some of their home and neighborhood beliefs and behaviors were, they were able then to share more about like, this is how kids act in my neighborhood. And we did word it a little bit differently to be able to say, well, at my neighborhood, and I had to kind of prompt them with some examples like, well, what if this happened in your neighborhood? What if this happened in your, at home? How would your mom handle it? Or what would your mom expect you to do? And then they were able to have a little bit more of some concrete examples on what to write down. And then we used the circle process, restorative circles, to be able to share some of those. And it took a couple of days as I facilitated that with the teacher, and we talked about that. And then we looked at different ways that we can change some of those, so we all felt like we were really adhering to our classroom expectations. So then the question comes, could you see this being a part of an advisory activity in middle school? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if you are having these kinds of conversations and validating those behaviors, normalizing that everybody comes from a different environment and brings different things to school, that, I like to give examples of, I wouldn't walk into a library and say, hey, everybody, I'm here. Just like I wouldn't go into the grocery store and start running around and climbing on things. So every environment has its own social and behavioral expectations, and really trying to just normalize that without judgment and really helping kids trying to figure that out. So I think that's a really great idea, Rebecca, to have that as an advisory activity. If the content in your middle school, or if it fits into a PBIS lesson, or, in the context of that, I think that's a really great idea and could be pretty valuable. Good question.
All right. Well, we certainly appreciate everybody joining us today. And again, feel free to reach out. You have our contact information, the title slide there, the materials for this particular presentation on the title slide, as well as posted on the Institute page on the PBS Minnesota website.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you both so much.
Thank
you. The next round will start at 11:35. So you do have a little break here before the next session starts. Thank you.
Thank you.